Going live. Alrighty, here we are again. Full circle. I'm Chad. Cheddar Caveman, lots of stuff. Really digging the new setup I've got here where I get to sit comfy. That's kind of sweet. So this will probably be the last episode before War Machine Weekend, as I imagine that the night before I need to go, there'll be all sorts of packing and whatnot that I need to do. So I don't see it likely that we'll have a show next week. So that's coming up, obviously, big event. As far as news goes, mostly just Company of Iron stuff today that dropped. I don't know how much we're going to really discuss Company of Iron on the show. It's not really competitive. I'm sure there's some interesting things and interesting things to talk about, but I think go play what you think looks like fun if you're going to play it. And I think it's definitely a cool thing if your friends aren't sure, a way to ease them into the larger game, or maybe you just, you have a bunch of stuff and you want to play some games with friends or have that sort of like RPG feel, but not quite. There seems like a lot of good stuff there, but that's most of the news. Aside from War Machine Weekend, which is coming up. One other tidbit of news, I am hoping, based on some posts in the Facebook groups, that we maybe get a little peek into what our one of the sculpts that we're going to be seeing. Probably summertime, I would guess, if it's being worked on now, maybe a little later even, for Circle at War Machine Weekend. So stay tuned to that. We will absolutely report on that. If I think about it, I'll try to tweet or post or something if I get the opportunity. So that'll be cool. The thing that I was asked this week, I may talk a little bit about what I'm going to do at War Machine Weekend, but then maybe at the end. But I've been getting a lot of questions about things that are the boogeymen of the meta, if you will, or the perceived boogeymen, since some of them are up-and-coming boogeymen, for what should Circle do into certain things and what to expect. So by no means should you assume that this is an exhaustive list, but I'm going to do my best to talk about a few of these and sort of like what they are aiming to do and what you should be looking to do to deal with them. So right off the bat, I will start with Madrak 1. This is sort of the newest entry to the Boogeyman post-CID, with the changes to him getting even ground, which gives +2 defense to Troll Blood models in his control area. He also can get a bigger control area with the Rune Bearer, and that means you have stuff like Champs, and they have Sanguine Bond now. Madrak's Feet heals and prevents charges, so it's going to make it pretty easy for you to be, well, I won't necessarily say, but it's going to be a very traditionally Troll Blood's problem list, where it's looking like people, at the very least, you're going to see, it seems, one unit of Champs with Scaldy. You may see some number of Trollkin Sorcerers in the list, because they can use Sanguine Bond to send the damage to the Sorcerer, not the other way around. Exactly, Sorcerer. And likely that list is going to be backed up with more Champs, with Warders, with possibly Long Riders. I've seen the Glacier King talked about, Bomber, Dire Troll Bombers, some other stuff. I think there's a lot of different ways to approach that. So let me back up and talk through things. He has even ground, that's +2 defense, and can't be knocked down, which is big with a troll army that all has stuff, right? Then the thing is with the Champs, they can shunt damage and they become defense 16 against melee, which is pretty significant. They also become armor 18 against everything because of the Creel Stone, and it's pretty likely that the list will contain Warders, or Trollkin Bouncers maybe, or Troll Bouncers. I forget what the light beast that has Shield Guard. So those are things that are going to make it pretty difficult to take the army down at range. Madrak himself is very hard to kill, even Madrak 1. They also have tacticians, so they're never really going to get in each other's way as long as they're sort of in his control area. And the champs hit incredibly hard. They went up to power and strength 12. They're weapon masters. They have 2 attacks. They're mat 7. And they can go up to mat 9 just by bringing a Fell Caller. And Madrak has Guided Hand, which is additional die on your first attack roll. Effectively boosted attack champs into traditional circle heavies is not where you want to be for the most part. Additionally, we're not really shooting too often, so I would say that's not the hugest deal for us. But what should we do into this? Let me talk about where the problem actually lies, in my opinion. So at speed 5, they can at most they have no threat extension in that list. Madrak does not provide any threat extension. At most, they could bring Lanissa Rissel. Champs are speed 5, 1-inch melee, so they threaten 9 inches. Warders are pretty similar. The Glacier King's shooting, but again, similar, speed 5, charges to 8, 10-inch threat in melee, 12 inches on the gun. Madrak himself has the ricochet shot, so that sort of gets depends on how far he threatens. He has Blood Moon also, so he can get one of his spells out if he gets killed. But so that's what the list has. I think you're going to see the Trollkin Sorcerer, and actually I'm going to see if I can take a quick look, because I think I'm trying to remember. So the Trollkin Sorcerer does have some anti-magic abilities, and I want to make sure I'm sharing them with you accurately, because I think that's going to be pretty important. Okay, so he has Disbinding. The things that matter is he has Disbinding, and he has Combat Caster, gives him the ability to use those magic abilities before running or charging. So it effectively means he can so like Rebuke from Kruger 2. So if you're playing somebody like Kruger 2, who I think actually is a potentially good answer into something like this because of his control aspect, Rebuke is something you'd really want to put on a unit, but look to see if that unit has a sorcerer, because if it does, that's a useless spell. So either try to kill the sorcerer first, or look for a different unit to put it on. I don't know that you're going to see so many sorcerers spread around to so many units that that's going to be overly concerning. Just know that if they do, not to waste your time with Rebuke, unless you know you can kill that model or models. So with that in mind, things that you can do in it. So the big problem is you're going to have things that are defense 16, armor 18, can spread their wounds around, and can be healed by a feat with Madrak's champions. And you're going to have a hard time shooting them on the approach. So you need to be accurate. You either need to be accurate, you need to use things that aren't ranged attacks, and or you probably need to spread that army out. He's still only going to have a 12-inch control area, and the scenarios right now are pretty live, most of them, if you spread out. And that means something like ambushing Wolf Warboros, Wolf Riders, potentially Blood Trackers, things like that, where you can spread his army out, are going to be great. Blood Trackers and Wolf Riders potentially also seem like they should have game, because they can kind of kite around that unit the whole time and just keep dealing damage, and they won't be able to do anything back as long as you space correctly. Kruger is particularly interesting, a few other casters as well, but the biggest thing that makes him interesting is I feel like Gallows is a very strong spell for him to have into this. Now the ability to use Sanguine Bond to pass around stuff is going to be sort of problematic, but the list I'm thinking of has, it depends how many Geomancers you have, but Gallows is potentially good spell here because it's a range 10 power 13, and you're talking about something that's armor 18. If you boost to hit, the defense is kind of not going to matter. If you boost to damage, the average damage is about 5. So, of course, they're going to be able to spread that around. But it does help you start whittling away at them if you have enough of those type attacks. The Woldbeards are probably not too bad here either. Yeah, they have shield guards, but the fact that you have a pretty high rate of fire is going to be good. And then you are dice minus 6, but with a boost, you're still doing 5. And if you play Woldbeards, be very smart about your shots, because you want to don't telegraph that you're going to boost damage, and don't boost damage into the warders. Deal with them later when the lines start to close. I think the Fulcrum has some interesting play in here too. Don't count on the fire sticking around. They will probably just use the Creel Stone to make it go away. That brings me to another point. The Creel Stone. If you anytime against Trollbloods, if you can start whittling away the Creel Stone or RFP the unit leader, the one with the big rock over his head, if you RFP him, it's gone. The more of those models that you take out, the smaller and smaller that bubble's going to get. So that's always good. I mentioned Wolf Riders earlier. I think they're particularly interesting if you can get a buff on them, because they have the additional die, or boosted. I think it's actually boosted. The boosted attack on the charge when they're assaulting in. So that's also very good. Hand of Fate in particular, I think, is very good on them, but stuff like Stone Skin from Baldur 1 is not bad. Curse of Shadows, definitely not bad either. With Curse of Shadows, even consider putting it on that front unit and just going through it with a unit of Wolf Riders and then following it behind. Synergy light War Beasts, I think, or cheap War Beasts are not going to be too bad. What I would hesitate to do is be very judicious with sending in a expensive heavy to try to deal with them, because if you can't kill enough models and you leave 2 or 3 champs alive, it's dead. It's just dead. Accept that fate. You're also going to have trouble because Stalkers are not going to be able to sprint out generally because of Sanguimon again. Also look to try to exploit Madrak's feet. If you can get him to use it to prevent charges, then try to do other things to deal damage. If he uses it to heal, then hopefully he's already given up the alpha, right? So if he's holding the feet and you have an alpha, take it. Make sure you can hit hard enough, but take it. If he feeds to stop your alpha, just try not to lose stuff to him coming into you. Back up and see what you can do. Those are sort of the generic-y sort of approaches to that. I would not. I would definitely be very careful what you play into it, and I'd be very careful what you commit to each part of the fight. Make sure that you can hit the defense that you need to be taking stuff down. Boostable attacks are going to help, obviously, in that situation as well. I think things like flanking Griffins are pretty good. I think things, synergy things are pretty good. Any sort of control is going to be good. So I mentioned Kruger, but TK is also good. And because they don't have, if you turn a few of them around, they have no way to, they can't charge you. What else? Forest, things that stop the line of sight from charges are obviously going to be beneficial. So Baldur 1, Wormwood is going to be able to do that. Sentry Stones maybe can do some of that. If they have a Fell Caller, the rough terrain's not going to really work, but Baldur 1's feet will stop them. Pillage Assault, probably decent here, actually. If you have Mosar. Speaking of which, Wild Argus is actually phenomenal to use. Mosar's probably the best to do it, but if you use that Animus to prevent their charges, they're probably going to be pretty sad. And there's nothing they can do about that ability hitting them. So you might be able to utilize that a little bit. Don't get too cutesy with it, though. And then obviously anything that helps you deal damage and hit is going to be good. I mean, that's not crazy, but what you don't want to do is go into that fight thinking stuff like unbuffed Thornton Ravagers, Blood Weavers, things like that don't have a to hit buff on them, that they're going to be very good, because if you need to be hitting defense 16, like, you realistically need to be up to at least mat 9 and better 10 or more if you can, or be doing it at range where they're not getting the whole benefit. So I actually do think that this is a place where Wolf Riders and Blood Trackers are definitely better than Ravagers and Blood Weavers. Oddly, no. I would love it. This seems like the perfect type of circumstance that I would want to play Blood Pack, but I still think they probably need a little bit more help before I'm willing to commit to them to a list. Also, this is only one list, so don't try to overcommit to a list to deal with this problem. Try to find ways that your existing list can, or be slightly altered in order to do so. So that's Magic 1. I don't want to go too much more into that. We haven't really seen it played. We haven't really seen if the Trollblood players are having success in other lists with it yet. But that's my advice for that list. Another one that came up was Makeda 2 Battle Cats, or Meowcada, if you will. That list just changed quite a bit with the Theme Force. So there's a Theme Force that they have that now that they can't take to spoiler anymore, but they do basically just straight up get free points if they play the theme. So that's pretty good for them. But the crux of the list is essentially the same, which is that she wants to use Stay Death to keep as many cats alive as long as possible throughout the game. And she's also going to utilize Tough. So how do you deal with this? First of all, don't waste attacks. It is very easy. Like, start calculating if you think you can put enough damage onto some of the cats and kill them, then do that. Realize that, like, Rebuke, where I mentioned before, stops things. You're not going to stop anything there because the pounce is not a chart. Like, there's it's not a special attack, so nothing is stopped by Rebuke there. Grievous Wounds is your absolute best friend in this case. It turns off her ability to heal them. It turns off the tough that they want to put on them. It is fantastic. Don't try to deal with them at range. They're going to be 15-19 when it matters, and you're just not going to chew through that. It's not going to happen. So I like something like a Devourer's Host list into this with Blood Weavers in specific. And a damage buff is certainly nice, and a to hit buff is certainly nice, although they are mat 8. But a lot of the cats are going to have dodge, which is going to be pretty frustrating. If you have enough Blood Weavers, I think that is your best bet into this list. Even if they don't make the kill themselves, as long as they can apply Grievous Wounds to as many models as possible, that is going to be a good matchup into that. It might be enough if the opponent understands what's happening to them that they will go to the other list. So keep that in mind. Other things for that, you're gonna have a harder. So make them spread out plan is not going to work in this case. In this case, you may actually be better off doing the opposite, where you want to sort of make it difficult for them to get a lot of. So the cats are large base. You want to try to make it as difficult as possible to get a lot of them on important targets or on your caster or things like that. They're going to be fairly accurate no matter what they do. They're going to hit fairly hard, but not as hard as they used to with the spoiler. I do think there's probably a point where you can stack armor enough. So if you're a Baldur 2 player, I think that might be something that works for you. Chromac 2 probably has a decent game into them as well because of his Grievous Wounds, I would say, and just the fact that his feet, both offensively and defensively, I think will do okay. When I played this list, I played it my Kruger 1 Devourer's Host list, which had 2 units of Blood Weavers, 2 Night Witches in it, and the White Man technically has Crit Grievous as well. And if they start losing too many of the cats to do work, it's just not going to be pretty for them. So you want to try to force that issue with a list like that. Continuous effects also are good. So if you have, if you do like fire from the fulcrum after having gotten many of them down to one box, now Makeda's having to spend focus on her turn, or the tough isn't there, and things like that. Stuff like that can be good. We don't really have a lot of great ways to do corrosion, but same thing there. Yeah. Looking at things like that. Kruger 1, Devourer's Host. Most of the Devourer's Host lists with Bloodweavers, I think, are your friend here. And then obviously realize, if you're into a tricky spot, realize that Makeda's actually kind of a weak spot in the list. And that her Fury is... The hardest thing for that player to do is to balance Fury, because they need to leech Fury, because Makeda can only take damage so many times. But they also can't have no Fury up. Excuse me. They can't just load up with Fury because of Frenzy, or not be a transfer target, things like that. So they're playing this delicate game. So sometimes your best bet is just flat out not attacking, or not attacking anything she wants to try to keep alive. That's kind of it for that matchup. That was a little quicker than the Madrak one, but that's kind of what I have to say about it. So we'll just keep moving forward. Ghost Fleet and Dark Host we're going to talk about together, because they pretty much have been played together so far. Yes, there's some variations on that, and some people are trying to win the mirror match, so they're switching from like Denegra to Gatsby 1, Asphyxious 1, or sometimes people are playing the Coven with Ghost Fleet. I've seen Terminus Ghost Fleet. There's a couple others. Denegra 1 Ghost Fleet is the scariest. That caster is still nonsense. I do hope that she's being looked at internally at Privateer Press. She's one of the few. Normally I'm sort of take the game as it is, but she really feels like one of the few vestiges of overpoweredness from the very beginning of the game that really still needs to be addressed. But that said, probably not going to happen between now and War Machine Weekend at the very least. So expect Ghost Fleet to be played with Denegra 1. Expect it backed up probably by Dark Host with Coven, or some other Coven list. I think it's a little too soon for the Warjack theme that came out to sort of be the secondary list, and I don't know if it even does quite as well as the Coven. You are going to want things that can kill infantry well. You want things that are resilient to shooting. You are going to want things that can deal both with cavalry and regular troops. And then you need to have magic weapons to deal with the incorporeal things, and if you can, you should have RFP. I don't absolutely think you need RFP, but if you can have it, you should. And then what you want to do is do your best to continue to kill their infantry while making sure you keep as much of your army safe and never give them up too much. The Coven is going to try to shut down your range game. So if you present a list with a lot of ranged attacks, they're probably going to try to bring the Coven into you. I personally am liking Kruger 1 into it. Bloodweavers do have an RFP option if I want to use it, but additionally that, he just kills a lot of infantry between Lightning Tendrils, his feet, his gun. Ravagers kill a lot of infantry. Bloodweavers kill a lot of infantry. Deathwolves can kill a lot of infantry. Try to get Eric safe for if you need him for the assassination, or to kill the Wraith Engine, because he's the best. If you can put magic weapons on him, he's probably the best to do that. Yeah. And the nice thing about the Kruger 1 list is all of the infantry I just mentioned do fine into their Cav and the Bane Mortars. So I think that list can play into either. If you don't feel comfortable playing that list, I would be looking at some of our RFP options. Funny enough, Baldur 2, stacking armor is actually a fine solution. They kind of can't do anything about a Armor 23 Woldrath. You have to keep Baldur safe in that list. That is number one job. I think he's very killable. Mosar, if you're a very good Mosar player, you can play in either of these. Crevasse is sort of the the key spell there. Recursive Shadows is helpful as well. I think there's probably some lists with many casters that can do it if you bring Bloodweavers. I did not like playing Wormwood into it, but there's probably builds for him that are fine. Those are the majority of the ones that come to mind. But make sure whatever. I think Kruger 2 actually should have game into it, just because his feet will help you. Alpha Storm, Windstorm will help keep you up from the shooting, things like that. So consider Kruger. If you're not playing Kruger 2, if you are playing Kruger 2, he can probably fill that void as well. But you still are probably going to have to be a pretty good player with him. I would not recommend Chromac 1. The Chromac 1 has Bestial, which can stop. Both those lists rely heavily on being able to cast spells. Bestial will stop that. Be very careful where you position Chromac and how you position him. Ideally, bring a Shield Guard if you can. Bring some... the Godders would be good with him if you can. Don't be afraid to feat on turn 1 with him to get all your upkeeps out and cast Bestial. That's probably the best thing you can possibly do with his feat. And... the thing with him is I'm not quite sure how to build him right now because I'm worried he'll lose on scenario if you build him sort of the way he wants to be played. So that one sort of eludes me. That's kind of why I haven't really picked him up yet. Pardon me. But I think he's still good in the Crix. So those are kind of the options that jump out. There might be some other ones out there, but those are the ones that immediately come to my attention. And then Dark Host. The thing is, always remember Dark Host. So if you have a list that can kill single wound infantry but can't do anything into cavalry or into the Wraith Engine, you're going to be upset. So make sure that that's not the case. Ravagers, Wolf Riders, things like that that are sort of like hit hard for infantry are going to be your friend. Tanith is interesting too because she can lock down multiple models with her gun potentially too. So consider that. Yeah. Let's see, what other boogeymen are out there? There's one more I was thinking of. Haley 3 is sort of up and coming. I think you're going to start seeing her in the Trencher theme. I think you need to play a better game than your opponent if they're playing Haley 3. That's sort of always true of Circle, but you definitely need to focus on that. Turning off her Cloud Wall and Wraithbane will be a huge help in this list because the spell that gives them +2 defense and you -2 defense is really big. So if you can ignore that, that's going to be in a good place. You want magic weapons again because the echoes might need to be removed from a zone. And then anti-magic will actually help as well. Ragman, Neon, and Holt are, I think, going to be key in that. And then it's just sort of like you need to know what to do into their infantry. Gale Winds. Pardon me, team. Gale Winds and Grail's spell are particularly good because then their Cloud Walls shut off. Or if you can provide your own Cloud Wall, I think something like Morvana 1 will out-attrition them throughout the game. You can do it with like Druids or Bloodweavers or whatever it is you want to do it with, but I do think you will see throughout the game that she's going to out-attrition whatever they do, and if you can do the Cloud Wall yourself or get into their Cloud Wall, etc., I think you'll have an okay time. So something else to consider. Also, being safe from ranged attacks will continue to serve you well with that. If anybody's in chat and there's a particular boogeyman of yours, let it be known. Somebody did mention Convergence Infantry, since that's a new theme that they got. The things to be concerned with there are not too dissimilar from the Dark Host Ghost Fleet situation. They can do the infantry a few different ways. One, they can bring a lot of small base infantry and try to jam them and keep having them come back and come back and come back at you. So again, if you can remove from play, which is harder against constructs, or if you can just kill massive numbers of infantry, that's not going to be really viable. You're also going to want to make sure whatever you can do can play into their heavy infantry, because that's also a direction that they may go, and you don't want your list to only have solved one of those problems. Ravagers again there. Ravagers, Wolf Riders. Wolves Warboros actually do okay there. Skinwalker's probably okay. Things like that. And then make sure, of course, whatever list you have is somewhat prepared to play into the other list, because you can't, you want to reduce the amount of list chicken you have as much as you can. Question sort of that I was a little bit talking about a second ago, but how does Baldur 2 with 1 or 2 Woldraths work into these drops? I don't like 2 right now, and the reason being that I don't think it has quite enough scenario presence, or it can, but you're sort of putting a lot of eggs in one basket. But 1 Woldrath with Earthsplit. Nope, that's wrong. I just blanked on the name of that spell. Roots of the Earth on it is incredibly hard to kill unless they have Wraithbane. Even then, it's not super easy by any means, and you've got healing and stuff to back it up. So I think one of them is pretty strong, and I think I don't really love it into the Trollbloods matchup that I mentioned, depending on what the rest of the list looks like, because I think they're going to eventually overcome the armor or the rest of your list, and you're sort of like trying to outbrick trolls, and it's not a place I really love to be. He does have the gun, though, into the Cruel Stone, so that's always something to sort of be angling for. Since you can't knock down the Battle Cats, I don't love it into Makeda, but they're going to have a hard time killing it back, so that game could go either way. I mentioned Ghost Fleet and Dark Host. I think it's probably fine there. You do need to understand the matchup, though. Trying to think. It's generally good into Signar. They don't have a way to ignore the buff to speak of, and they don't crack enough armor to deal with it. But you need the rest of your list needs to be there and doing something, or you'll lose on scenario. So those are the things to consider, I think, with Baldur 2. I personally am not a Baldur 2 guy because I just get bored thinking about him, playing him. It's obviously very straightforward in what he does. He would be an example of one of the boogeymen we can present, actually, I would say, though. Especially with the changes, he's going to hit hard. He's going to be very defensive. The Woldrath is very hard to kill. Megalith is very hard to kill, presents certain problems. Wold Guardians are a little better now, or are about to be a little better, etc., etc. I don't really expect those CID changes in time for War Machine Weekend at this point. Like I said, it's next week. I mean, they could drop them, like, tomorrow or Friday, but... And it sort of depends on if their Christmas models are going to be at the event or not, I suppose. Boogeyman. What are the Boogeyman? Retribution, I think, is sort of even for us right now. I'm not overly concerned. Minions will revisit when their CID stuff goes through. We talked about Crix. Khador, oddly enough, I hear a lot less out of. We've talked a lot about what to do into their armor skew. But be prepared, I think, to see their Iron Fang Pikemen and things like that. Protectorate, Amon continues to be a similar problem, but also look for more Temple Flame Guard, which are single wound high armor troops, so they have different things that make them difficult, and things like that. So nothing from Protectorate really jumps out as like super duper problem. Mercs sort of as in flux. I expect to start to see more of them in general. Irregulars is probably going to be the biggest list. Don't rely on too much stealth into Mercs would be my suggestion. And then just understand what your list needs to do into Ostrom. Ideally, you want a list that punches hard and is resilient to shooting. Not that that's super easy, but mass stealth they don't like, but don't rely on stealth to keep like a key model alive. Trolls we talked about. Circle we talked about. Legion's in a weird place. I sort of expect their CID, which is like probably after the Crix one, will change them a lot. Look for Hellmouths to be on the table more though, so have some answers for that, or at least understand how to play against them. No minions yet. Talked about Scorn. Who did I leave out? Emergence Bricks. Grimkin. I think Grimkin are probably one of the boogeymen out there right now. But I think the way that you beat them is you just have to outplay them. You have to understand their arcana without... how do I want to say this? You want to understand their arcana and what it can do to you, and then figuring out how much or how little you need to play around that, and sort of like which one to bait out, and like how to shift your plan on the fly. You need to be able to do those sort of things. Be careful of their infantry. It can hit hard enough to kill most of our stuff. Their war beasts can be very hard to kill. Try to kill the death knell if you can. They should be able to keep it relatively far back, but then they're not getting corpses, and it's, yeah. Well, sorry. So far, I've won all my games into Grimkin, I do believe, and mostly it's been by trying to bait out the thing that I think is the most worrisome arcana-wise, playing around it, knowing what it is. Try to get them to use it in an opportune time if you can. Don't feed into it too much. The one that heals all their stuff back from little to full, make sure that you're killing pieces at a time. There's the knockdown one. If you have stuff that can't be knocked down, go ham. If you don't, just realize that you could lose until they use that. There's one model that, you make sure no key models are able to be knocked down, like your caster. And avoid lists where that's going to be tempting. Like, I wouldn't play Chromac 2 into the Dreamer, probably, because he's going to want to go in, and if a good Dreamer player is careful, they'll just hold that Arcana until they can knock Chromac down and then kill him. Grail might fall into a similar category because he's really wanting to go in, and so forth. Magic weapons are key because they're probably going to have Gremlin Swarms in at least one of their lists, and you want to get them off of points, but we usually have enough even sort of like situational magic weapons. And yeah, that's really the big things. Do note the things that are squishy and the things that aren't. Like Gorehounds are cheap and actually really squishy. Rattlers are a little less so. Crabbits. Be careful, understand where their shield guards are before you're shooting, so you're not just wasting shots or triggering something you don't want to. So that's kind of the boogeyman that I see right now. I think Trolls may add Colgrim into that list when she comes out. I could see a couple things in Cater rising to prominence, but so far they seem sort of in a low period. I'm not looking forward to them playing more Mana War, because those are going to be miserable for us to try to deal with, I think. And yeah, so that's kind of it. We'll sort of leave it there. And then I mentioned that I would talk a little bit about War Machine Weekend. Not a ton to say. My plans are to play in the Last Chance Qualifier on Friday, see how I do with that. Currently planning to play Una 2 and Kruger 1, I think. I have played both into a lot of places. I've been running a little bit of practice stuff in my basement here with Kruger 1, and I think that list right now has even more game than it had when I was playing it before. I don't know that it's... I think I would, I may, after this, be looking at Kruger 2 in Bones, just because I think it's going to be a much more flexible list, but I really do like the Kruger 1 list right now. I think just answers so many problems that are out there. I mentioned a few of them just now, but infantry is on the rise, and that means he's got more and more of a place. The Unit 2 list is interesting. It's also in Devourer's Host. I've been playing a lot with Wolf Riders, and they have been pretty phenomenal for me with Hand of Fate and Mirage, and I think they will continue to serve what it is that I want from the other list. They can sort of do enough work into armor to be relevant there, especially with Hand of Fate, as I mentioned. They also can do things into heavy infantry. They can do things into light infantry. So they're very flexible, and that's what I really like about them. And they're very fast. Being able to flank super hard with stuff like that on turn 1, running 18 inches can be incredible. They are a little less resilient to shooting though, so I do have to be careful with that. So that's kind of what I'm planning to play. It's sort of interesting. I'm going to have, I think, one heavy war beast between my two lists, but so be it. Don't don't have a ton to say there. I'm hoping to do well in the last chance qualifier, and if I do, see where that takes me. I think there's a no theme tournament on Saturday that I'm not planning to play in, and I think there's like a 32 person scrambler in there, and I may play that if I'm not still in the other events. And then of course the Invitational will be starting Saturday night, ending on Sunday, and that's always a pretty cool event. See sort of I call it half of the culmination of the competitive events. I think Lock and Load's the other one. And then there's the team events that exist. But the question about, can I talk through which list of the two I would drop in each key matchup and why? A little bit of it I play by ear. I mean, I think if it depends on the question I'm being asked. If I see a lot of infantry, heavy or light infantry, if I see a lot of range, I'm probably going to be reaching for Kruger 1. If I see something with an over-reliance on clouds that he can still do work into, so like not the Kodiak clouds, but any other type clouds, probably going to be reaching for Kruger 1. I sort of see Una 2 as more of the all-around list. She can play into some infantry, but as it starts skewing too far, she probably will back away. She can play into some ranged. I have some techniques for that, but again, as it starts skewing too far, I'm probably going to want to reach to like a Kruger 1. I think Signar is sort of the tricky one there. If they have a Colossal or a lot of armor, I probably still need to play Una. And if they don't, then I probably can play either or Kruger 1. Legion depends a lot on what they brought. Either list can be strong. I think Una 2 is better into Fianna, though, because of Hand of Fate and cavalry charges into their beasts. Crix is almost certainly going to be Kruger, unless they throw a weird curveball at me. Protectorate depends on their list. Probably Una, though. It could be either. Depends. One of the nice things with both those lists is I don't have to land a debuff, and I'm not overly reliant on being too close to the book that's casting spells at me, so that's good. If they have a lot of lightning immune troops, I suppose I may hesitate on Kruger 1, but I may not. If they have cavalry, I'll probably match that with my cavalry, since, well, I can do it either way. Ravager's threatened far enough, too. Kador depends. If they bring a lot of armor, Una. If they don't, could be either, depending on what they're playing. Same for Rhett. I'll match Griffin spam with my Griffin spam. I think the cavalry gives me an edge there too. I mentioned the Scorn matchup. I would play Kruger probably into the Cats, Una into a lot of their other stuff. Trollbloods, probably Una, unless for some reason they're presenting me with a lot of shooting. I don't really expect a ton of that right now. Especially since the prevailing wisdom is going to be drop Madrak 1, he kills Circle. I'm not going to do that. Other Circle, I'll almost certainly play Una into Mercs, it depends. So, yeah. I feel like my two lists give me a decent situation where I'm not in list chicken so much, where I know that I think that Una list can play into most things, and the Kruger list can actually play into a lot more things than people think it can, and then work from there. Also, scenario helps equalize out a lot of this as well. So that's kind of my plan for that. After this weekend, how things change with CID and a few releases may modify how I approach stuff, but I do feel like that Una 2 list is probably going to be one I stick with for a little while, I think. I like her model, I like how she plays, I like her rules. Hand of Fate is a phenomenal spell, so that's sort of where I'm focused. Maybe to close out, I'm going to do, so there's this thing kind of going around on Twitter right now that Jay Larson started. I think he stole it from somebody else, but where, call it hot takes is what I think he started calling it. But basically he's just sort of posts out 5-10 thoughts at a time. Just random, not necessarily random, but no context previously given, right? Just to say an opinion on something. And I'm going to do To close this out, I think what I'm going to do is 5 of those about circle. And I'm literally just going to go off the top of my head. So hopefully I don't stutter through this too much. And these are not in any particular order, but just little tidbits. Maybe this will help generate some discussion for later on or something like that. And then we'll close it out. So number 1, I think sentry stones are extremely overrated for circle. I have not been playing with them that much, and I have not found that I've missed them whatsoever. I think wolf riders are under-respected, but they're very difficult to play, and that's probably why. But I think that they're actually underrated in our faction. And that's not to say they couldn't be slightly. I'm not going to say necessarily that I wouldn't accept seeing some other changes to them, but I think that they are much better than most people give credit for. Number 3, circle. SR 2017 is really good for circle for the same reasons that it is for Crix, which is that we can manipulate a lot of the board, our opponent, and utilize a lot of terrain, which there now is. And it has made a significant change for us, as well as reducing the number of warjack spams and long-range shooting spams that we were previously sort of dealing with. I think that the Living Beast theme, while good, should be utilized very carefully and very scarcely because of its potential weakness on scenario. I think that the best theme, and then we'll do this as the last one, and I think the best theme forces we have are actually still Devourer's Host, and I think Bones of Orboros. The Secret Masters, I think, is good, but it doesn't have a lot of... I don't see it having a lot of potential, like a lot of builds right now, and that sort of makes me hesitate to play it. I think that the Wolfsworn list is fine. It never really comes together for me like how I want to play it, and I just mentioned the Living Beast theme, so I think that one's sort of in the middle. I do like it with some casters, and just. It's not, even though it's what we were waiting for. I think the top ones are still Bones and Devourer's Host, personally. I had a number 6 in there also. I came up with number 6. I'm disappointed that Loki can't play in more themes. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it's a really cool model, and I do like Tanith, but right now I would find a lot of places to play Loki if I could outside of her, and I have to sort of sit down and build a Tanith list and put Loki in it rather than build a list that Loki would fit well in. And that's disappointing. He's also a really cool and sort of expensive model, so it's a little disappointing that I think we're going to not see a lot of him. Hopefully Privateer Press takes note, and we can, that can be reapproached at some point. All right, we'll call it 6 hot takes. Or you can combine the 2. So, anyways, those are my last thoughts. Like I said, War Machine Weekend next week. Don't expect an episode. I will try to tweet and post and things if I can. If you have any questions, always feel free to comment anywhere that you see me on this video, or I'm Cheddar Caveman, wherever. I'm always open to answer some questions. I discovered the Discord, actually, so there's another place that I'll try to check from time to time. Anyways, thanks for watching. Real quick, shout-outs. Griffin's Roost Painting. My wife's painting company. She'll be at War Machine Weekend actually teaching some classes. So if you're there, try to stop in the hobby room and say hi to her. She'll have a badge and a cute little baby griffin with her. Should be easy to find. Muso Minis. I think I'm up to date on posting videos there. Anyways, they let me post videos. They have great products. They'll be at War Machine Weekend also, so say hi to them. Thanks to them. And thanks to all of you for watching. And that will be all for tonight. See you at War Machine Weekend.